I guess perhaps one can argue to say that, the case for being creative was always there or would have been there, but maybe there is more compelling evidence or reasons as to why creativity has become, such a big conversation or gaining so much traction. And as you also touched upon something like AI. So one question to start off, Andrew, is that, how come creativity has gained so much attention? And then in the context of Gen Z, your young first line level managers, right? What relevance does it have for them?
Well, first of all, I think, as you're saying, why is creative thinking more important now than ever? And that is because AI didn't just burst onto the stage yesterday. Like all innovation, as much as we like to hype it, most innovation creeps up on us. It is definitely moving faster than it was 10 years ago or 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, where people could live a whole generation and not see any change. And if anything, Gen Z are going to see more change in the next 10 years than you and me have seen in our lifetime. So I know it's overused, but the change is exponential, but we need to think about that. So whilst that change is coming through as exponential, we've got to ask ourselves, what skills have we as humans got left to offer into the workforce if data can be crunched and analysed faster than we can do it? And so I think, at the end of the day, all we're going to have left, and maybe this is a bit dramatic, is that ability to come up with new and novel ideas of connecting things that can't be connected by data. Now, why is it relevant for Gen Z? Well, it's relevant for Gen Z and their managers, because Gen Z, as having kids of Gen Z, are going to be very different to our generation. And we know that they're true digital natives. They're not learning anything. They've grown up with an iPad. And there's a great picture of an iPad porta potty. So, the one place sometimes where we had the chance to ponder and be creative, sitting on the potty as a kid, has now been taken up. You can buy an iPad porta potty. So these kids have literally grown up with it in their hands, and so they are truly digital natives. But their consumption is, for that generation, is about access rather than possession. It's about expression of individual identity, and it's about ethical concerns. Now, that's a complete change around to our generation. And if we're marketing to Gen Z, or we're selling to Gen Z, or Gen Z are selling, or we're employing Gen Z, then we need to understand that the whole consumer landscape is changing. And that's going to require creative thinking, because all the things we used to do in the past that worked aren't going to work. If Gen Z are about access rather than possession, they're not really interested in owning things anymore. They're happy to subscribe, for example. Instead of selling 1,000 cars, a company's going to have to sell one car 1,000 times. And so all this change, a shift of looking at the marketplace, is going to change, and that's going to require creativity. Now, AI might tell us the shift in data. It might tell us that Gen Z are all about access rather than possession. They're all about individual identity, and they're all about ethical concerns. We can gather that from AI, but what do we do with that information? That information has to now be said, right, this is the new generation. How do we treat them as consumers? How do we treat them as employees? And if you are Gen Z, how do you deal with us managers that are not Gen Z and won't necessarily have grown up in your world?
Excellent. And you, I think, touch upon a very good point, which is to look at the Gen Z cohort or the generation from a consumer lens, right? Because they're so used to adapting to technology and they want everything quick. And so companies really have to figure out a way to keep them engaged and come up with something new. One follow-up question there, Andrew, was to understand that, there is obviously the case of creativity or innovation perhaps felt more in the technology space, right? Because, the shelf life of knowledge or shelf life of anything that they may come up with so short. What has been your experience when you think about creativity in other industries, just as a general, observation? Do you sense that, is there still a view that some of these companies, like perhaps, I don't know, maybe like manufacturing or, as you alluded earlier, like banking, what do you find? Do you find that leaders are still of the view that, maybe I don't need creativity, or that's more for the tech space? I'm just curious to hear what have you been seeing?
Look, I think unfortunately tech and digital permeates everything now. I mean, you've got examples where one of our clients, Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, they're not allowed to call themselves a car company anymore. So they are a tech company. So I think tech will be permeating all products and everything we consume, obviously to different degrees. But at the end of the day, consumption for Gen Z means having access to products and services, not necessarily owning them. So that's a huge shift in thinking. We worked with a Chinese car company introducing their car brand into Australia. Very interesting story. It was, when it came into Australia, it was ranked, I think, 38 out of 40 cars in Australia, as in it didn't quite come in with great reviews. It came in as an iconic brand, but the reviews were basically calling it a piece of plastic junk. And we had to work with the executive team to bring this car into Australia and rebrand it. We couldn't go back to the factory line and say, hey, the car's not getting great reviews because of the quality of the car. Now, I have no comment on the quality of the car. I'm not a car expert. I'm just telling you the reviews it received, whether they were just or not. But anyway, as we worked through with the car company, trying to get them to understand, well, what can we do differently? They came up with a concept of using its previous brand of a subscription model. And they were a little bit ahead of their time because they weren't necessarily focusing that on Gen Z, although many of the executives were younger than me. So it was really interesting to try and rework a car, which is a physical object, to a new generation and say, well, how do we sell it different? I mean, you had the Korean cars that were offering the 10-year warranties. You had the Japanese cars that were offering incredible no faults. You had the beautiful German cars that were luxury. So what were the Chinese cars going to offer? They couldn't compete on any of those grounds. And so using creative thinking, we helped them come up with that. And recently, the good news is they've now moved into the #1 slot in their competitive in Toyota, and their sales have grown 177%. And I'm not accrediting myself to all of that, but we were there with the first 15 people that kicked off the car in Australia a couple of years ago. But it was that level of looking at the brand, looking at the market, looking at the creative thinking and saying, what can we do differently with a car company so we're not just repeating and reselling another car. And that was the creative thinking, which is very different to Six Sigma. Creative thinking is, I hate to say it, thinking outside the box. It's a very different, looking for ideas where nobody else is looking, into that blue ocean. And to come up with a subscription model, I know cars are now doing it now, but this was the first, as we know it, of its kind. It really blew the market out.